Have you ever noticed how a period of really intense, grinding career burnout almost always comes with terrible, fragmented sleep?
Oh, absolutely. You wake up at 3 a.m. and your brain is just spinning.
Right, exactly. Or on the flip side, how a sudden moment of creative breakthrough makes you feel physically lighter. Like you finally solve a complex problem that's been bugging you for weeks, or you finally have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding.
And it literally feels like a tangible weight has been lifted off your chest.
Yes. You can suddenly take a full breath again.
Well, if you are sitting there listening right now and nodding along, I want to assure you, you are not imagining that connection.
Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's great to be here to get into this one.
We are exploring a massive, heavily researched stack of fascinating articles, philosophical essays, and case studies straight from the Talent Whisperer's archives. And our overarching mission today is to really look at how we heal, how we grow, and how we lead our own lives.
And we're doing that by introducing a pretty radical concept.
We are. We're introducing the coining of a brand new paradigm-shifting term today. We are going to be talking about Ayurvedic whispering. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a profoundly elegant concept to dive into, and it fundamentally challenges how we view human development. The core premise here is this. What if the healing of your physical body and the awakening of your highest human potential aren't actually separate things?
Which is how we usually treat them, right?
Exactly. What if they are intertwined, simultaneous expressions of the exact same living system? In our modern, hyper-specialized world, we are so used to treating our physical ailments in one building with one set of medical experts.
Yeah, you go to a clinic for your back pain.
Right. And then we take our career frustrations or our emotional roadblocks to a completely different building with a different set of coaches or therapists. Ayurvedic whispering asks us to consider that these are not separate narratives at all.
They're the same thing.
They are simply different dialects of the same language.
Yeah.
It's the exact same living ecology trying to communicate with us about its state of balance or, its imbalance.
I love that framing, but I want to push on it for a second because it sounds almost too neat. We are so conditioned to view ourselves as machines.
We really are.
If my car has a flat tire, I don't take it to a software engineer. If I have a stomach ache, I take an antacid. If I have a motivational slump, I drink an espresso and listen to a motivational audiobook.
The quick fix.
Right. But to really understand this brand new term, Ayurvedic whispering, we have to deconstruct that mechanical mindset. And we need to look at the two distinct roots this term comes from. The first half is Ayurveda. Let's break down that ancient tradition first, because we cannot understand the whispering part until we understand the biological philosophy.
That makes sense.
How does Ayurveda actually view the human body, if not as a machine with broken parts?
So that mechanical analogy you just used, the car with the flat tire, that is exactly what Ayurveda pushes back against. It's a traditional system of health that emerged in the Indian subcontinent thousands of years ago. And it views the body not as a machine, but as a deeply dynamic, intelligent ecosystem.
An ecosystem that is constantly adjusting.
Continually, relentlessly seeking equilibrium. This balance isn't a static finish line you cross. It's a fluid, momentary state that is constantly influenced by your food, your daily rhythm, your physical environment, and crucially, your psychological life experiences.
Okay, so to really grasp the depth of the archives we're exploring today, there are a few core terms we need to define, right?
Yes, 4 core terms from the source text. The first is Prakriti. You can think of Prakriti as your natural constitutional pattern. It's a unique, deeply individualized balance of energies present at your birth.
Like a baseline.
Exactly. It is your inherent baseline of health, your truest physical and psychological alignment before the world gets its hands on you.
Right, so Prakriti is the blueprint. It is the baseline where everything hums along perfectly. But, life happens, deadlines happen, grief happens, toxic work environments happen, and we inevitably drift from that baseline.
We always do. And that drift, that deviation from your unique blueprint is called Vikriti.
Vikriti.
Yes, Vikriti is your current momentary state of imbalance relative to your natural constitution. It is the exact coordinates of where you are right now, and it's heavily influenced by your lifestyle, the chronic stress you're carrying, your diet, your sleep debt, your relational environment.
It's the messy reality of Tuesday afternoon.
Precisely. And Ayurveda gives us a highly sophisticated language to observe exactly how a human being moves away from Prakriti and into Vikriti. It does this through the concept of the doshas.
The doshas. This is the part of the archives that completely shifted my perspective because these aren't just abstract elements. They map so perfectly onto how we behave, especially under pressure.
They really do.
We need to spend some real time here because the archives break down these three, doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha. If we're going to understand how our bodies and our careers are linked, we need to know what these patterns actually look like in the wild. Let's start with vata.
Okay, vata. Vata is the energy of movement associated with air and space. It governs everything from the circulation of your blood and the blinking of your eyes to the rapid firing of your neural pathways.
So it's very quick, very light.
Yes. When a person with a naturally high vata constitution is in balance, when they are residing in their prakriti, they are often brilliant ideators. They're adaptable, highly creative, visionary, quick-witted.
They are the people who can connect completely disparate dots in a brainstorming session and see the big picture.
Exactly. But when vata gets pushed into vikriti, when that movement energy gets overstimulated by, say, back-to-back Zoom meetings, travel, erratic eating, and endless notifications,
It turns into chaos. The archives paint this picture so clearly. In a corporate or personal growth environment, a vata imbalance looks like severe anxiety, scattered focus, missed deadlines, and the classic shiny object syndrome.
you literally cannot ground your energy enough to finish a single task.
Right. And physically, that same vata imbalance shows up as insomnia, dry skin, and digestive irregularity. The erratic mind and the erratic digestion are the exact same vata imbalance.
The system is just moving too fast. Now, contrast that with pitta. Pitta is the energy of transformation and metabolism. It's associated with fire and water.
Fire meaning heat, intensity.
Yes. In the body, pitta governs digestion, body temperature, and cellular metabolism. In the mind, it governs intellect, courage, and the digestion of complex ideas. When pitta is balanced, you see a sharp, decisive, highly focused individual.
Let's map pitta to a startup founder or a driven executive. In balance, they are a warm, visionary leader who can cut through the noise, make tough calls, and execute a strategy flawlessly.
But add too much heat, too many late nights, too much caffeine, too much competitive pressure, and that fire flares up into a severe vikriti. The balanced leader turns into a tyrant.
Yeah, the archives show that an overblown pitta manifests psychologically as intense irritability, anger, micromanagement. It's that sharp-tongued frustration that burns out their entire team.
And biologically, that excess fire shows up as acid reflux, inflammation, high blood pressure, skin rashes. The burning anger in the boardroom and the heartburn after lunch are not a coincidence. They're the exact same pitta flare-up.
Which brings us to the third dosha, kapha.
Kapha is the energy of structure, lubrication, and stability. It's associated with earth and water. It forms our muscles, our bones, our cellular structure, and our immunological resilience.
So it's the solid foundation.
Right. Psychologically, kapha is the foundation of endurance, deep empathy, and emotional steadiness. A balanced kapha individual is the rock of their organization or their family. They're patient, deeply loyal, methodical, rarely rattled by crises.
They provide the grounding force that keeps the vata creatives and the pitta executives from flying off the handle.
Exactly. But of course, structure can turn into stagnation. If kapha is pushed into vikriti, perhaps through a lack of physical movement, an overly comfortable but unfulfilling job, or lack of mental stimulation, that beautiful stability turns to heavy, cold mud.
In a career, a kapha imbalance looks like profound resistance to change. It's the manager who refuses to adopt a new software because we've always done it this way.
It manifests as lethargy, stubbornness, and a slow slide into depressive complacency.
And physically, it mirrors this exactly. Weight gain, sluggish digestion, sinus congestion, a feeling of heaviness in the limbs. The heavy, unmotivated mind is the heavy, congested body.
When you understand the doshas, you realize that symptoms are no longer just annoyances to be medicated away. They are profound diagnostic language. But there's one more vital piece to the Ayurvedic puzzle before we bring in talent whispering, and that is Agni.
Okay, wait, I want to pause on Agni and play devil's advocate for a moment. Most of us just think of our metabolism as how fast we burn calories. We eat a sandwich, our body breaks it down.
The standard biological view.
Right. The archives translate Agni roughly to fire or digestive intelligence, but the text takes this massive leap and says that Agni doesn't just digest our lunch, it digests our experiences. You're saying the archives treat the physical digestion of a heavy meal and the psychological digestion of a traumatic board meeting as the exact same biological mechanism. How does that actually work?
It sounds radical until you observe your own physiology. Agni is the central transformative intelligence of the entire human organism. Yes, in the gastrointestinal tract, it breaks down food into bioavailable nutrients and separates out waste. But your nervous system and your brain have to perform the exact same transformative function with sensory input and life experience.
Digesting life.
Exactly. When you endure a difficult interaction, a conflict with a spouse, a failure at work, a moment of deep grief, your system has to digest that experience. It has to extract the usable wisdom, the nutrients of the lesson, and eliminate the toxic emotional residue.
And when it works well.
When your agni is robust and balanced, you process both heavy food and heavy life experiences with relative ease. You learn from the failure and you move on. But when agni is weak, whether from poor diet or chronic emotional overwhelm, things sit undigested.
And that causes problems.
Major problems. In the gut, undigested food becomes physical toxins, what Ayurveda calls ama. In the mind, undigested experiences become psychological ama. That's resentment, trauma, limiting beliefs, chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
So yes, a weakened agni means you cannot process your lunch and you cannot process your grief. They're the same faltering intelligence.
That is heavy, but it makes so much intuitive sense. If Ayurveda is the art of reading these physiological signals of balance and agni, then we need to look at the second half of our new term, talent whispering.
The modern counterpart.
Right. If Ayurveda is reading the signals of the body, talent whispering is reading the signals of human potential. We all know what traditional management or coaching looks like. It's very command and control. We set a KPI, we measure the gap, and we push the person to close it.
Force them to close it, usually.
But talent whispering is fundamentally different. It's the art of perceiving latent capacity, innate resilience, and the subtle conditions that help a specific individual grow. The core philosophy of a talent whisperer, according to the archives, is that you do not force development. You don't overpower someone, you don't shame them, and you certainly don't bend them to your will to make them better or more productive.
Instead, you listen deeply for emerging strengths. You curate an environment where growth can naturally and inevitably unfold. What's fascinating here is what happens when we hold these two ancient and modern perspectives together. That is the true synthesis of Ayurvedic whispering.
Bringing the body and the potential together.
Both traditions, while originating in totally different spheres, share a quiet, unshakable assumption. Life reveals itself through patterns. The living system is always communicating, and these signals become visible when we cultivate the humility and the skill to actually pay attention. Ayurvedic whispering explores what becomes possible when we stop treating the physical body and personal development as walled-off, separate domains.
It sees the tension in your jaw and your fear of public speaking as intertwined ways of understanding the same living whole.
Exactly.
It is a total paradigm shift. I want you, listening right now, to think about your own life for a second. Let's say you're sitting at your desk and you get a sudden, sharp migraine. How often do you treat that migraine as a purely mechanical failure? You think, ugh, my body's betraying me again. I need a pill so I can keep staring at this spreadsheet.
We've all been there.
But the next day, you experience a massive wave of procrastination or a total lack of motivation for a project. You don't treat that as a mechanical failure. You treat it as a moral or mental failure. You blame your willpower. You think, I'm lazy, I need to try harder. You treat the body as a broken machine, and you treat the mind as a flawed character. Ayurvedic whispering invites you to see both the migraine and the procrastination as the exact same language.
It changes the entire context of a symptom. Whether it's chronic tension in your shoulders or a persistent low-grade feeling of dread every Sunday evening before the work week begins, neither of these is a bad thing that just needs to be excised or medicated away so you can get back to baseline productivity.
They're data.
They're both vital information. They're both your system desperately trying to tell you how it is responding to its current environment.
If we are going to stop treating these as separate issues, we need to know exactly what to look for. How do these physiological imbalances actually mirror our psychological roadblocks in real time? Let's decode those signals because the sources go incredibly deep into how this living ecology communicates.
Let's do it.
On the bodily side, as we just discussed with the doshas, when the system is moving toward Vikriti, we see changes in sleep architecture, digestive speed, energy lulls, and localized physical tension. But what about the signals of our potential? How does human potential signal that it is untapped or that it is facing friction?
Talent whispering pays attention to a deeply nuanced set of psychological and relational signals. We are looking for curiosity, hesitation, friction, and the quiet emergence of confidence. These signals almost always appear when a person is approaching the edge of their current capabilities.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. When someone is experiencing deep friction, frustration, or hesitation in their role, the traditional view is that they are failing or that they're a bad fit. But a talent whisperer reads that friction differently. It might signal the presence of immense potential that simply has not yet found its proper avenue of expression.
It means they're close to a breakthrough.
It is a sign they are nearing what we call the stretch zone, the precipice where profound learning and transformation become biologically and psychologically possible.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The cross-pollination between the two is staggering. When we view this through the lens of Ayurvedic whispering, these signals reflect one another in a constant feedback loop.
They mirror each other.
Yes. The stress in your external environment, a toxic boss, a looming layoff, it doesn't just stay out there in the ether of your career. Your body physically absorbs the threat. It shows up as literal muscular tension in your psoas, your jaw, your shoulders.
And on the flip side, uncertainty about your life path, a profound lack of purpose in your daily work, quietly but systematically degrades your agni. It downregulates your digestive intelligence. You stop absorbing nutrients effectively, your sleep quality plummets, and your physical resilience bottoms out.
Because it's all one loop. Misalignment in one dimension of your life inevitably bleeds into the others. You cannot out-hustle a physiological imbalance, and you cannot medicate away a crisis of purpose.
But conversely, and this is the hopeful part, movements toward balance in one area begin to restore coherence across the entire system. When you begin to align your daily rhythm with your prakriti, the renewed vitality in your physical body often coincides with suddenly clear, decisive thinking about your career.
Finding a deep sense of purpose can drastically, measurably improve your physical immune response and resilience.
Because the system is unified. This is why the Ayurvedic whisperer must develop a very specific, highly attuned type of perception. The archives call it nonverbal relational attunement.
I love this phrase, nonverbal relational attunement. It essentially means listening before words are ever spoken.
Yes, because words are often the very last thing a living system uses to communicate. And honestly, they're often the most deceptive. Meaningful information about a living ecology appears through embodied and relational patterns long before it is fully articulated in a sentence.
So what does that actually look like in practice?
Nonverbal attunement is the capacity to sense and respond to the living moment-to-moment field of interaction between people. It's a quiet, ongoing dialogue that unfolds through timing, physical orientation, proximity tone of voice, breath rate, and most importantly, nervous system regulation. It is the ability to sense the actual organization of a living system right now, in the present moment, beneath the polite veneer of a conversation.
The sources use a fantastic visceral parallel to explain this, and I want to spend some time visualizing it. They use the analogy of the horse whisperer.
It's a great analogy.
Picture this. You walk into a dusty, enclosed stall with an unruly, massive, deeply anxious, 1,000-pound horse. The animal is terrified, pacing, nostrils flared, eyes wide. You cannot just stand there and talk it into calming down. You can't hand the horse a PowerPoint presentation on why the barn is actually a safe environment.
That definitely wouldn't work.
Right. A horse whisperer communicates almost entirely through the physics of energy, posture, and nervous system regulation. They don't try to physically overpower the animal. They would lose that fight instantly. Instead, they listen with their entire body. They drop their own heart rate. They read the incredibly subtle cues, a minute shift in the horse's weight, the flick of an ear, the depth and rhythm of its breath, the tension in the lead rope.
They establish safety through their own grounded presence.
Exactly. And the archives argue that the Ayurvedic whisperer does the exact same thing with human beings in a boardroom, a classroom, or a living room.
It is a profound parallel. Animals act as massive clarity amplifiers for nonverbal attunement because they lack the cognitive overlay of language. They don't have words to hide behind, so they cannot lie about their nervous system state.
But humans can.
We try to. But despite our sophisticated language, we are fundamentally animals. We are constantly signaling our discomfort, our fear, our openness, or our hidden stress through involuntary physiological cues long before we ever open our mouths to speak.
You see it all the time in meetings.
Watch what happens in a meeting when a sensitive topic is broached. Someone's posture tightens slightly, the pacing of their speech accelerates. A micro-withdrawal happens where they physically lean back an inch. Their breathing becomes shallow and locked in their upper chest. The Ayurvedic whisperer doesn't just listen to the words, "I'm totally fine with that decision." They sense the rigid, Vata-deranged pattern of regulation beneath the words.
And this brings us to a concept in the text that feels almost mystical, but the archives ground it purely in human neurobiology. The concept is clairsentience, which literally translates to clear feeling.
Clear feeling.
The deep dive defines it as the ability to feel emotional energy and somatic shifts with unusual clarity and depth. A highly clairsentient person acts as a real-time emotional detector in a room. But, and this is a massive but, there is a glaring neon warning sign flashing in the archives about this ability.
Yes, and it is a crucial caveat. The archives refer to it as the misreading trap. This is the single most common and destructive pitfall for anyone who is naturally empathetic or deeply sensitive to the nonverbal signals of others.
How does the trap work?
It works like this. You may be absolutely 100% correct about the raw feeling or the physical sensation you are sensing in a room, but you might be completely disastrously wrong about the source or the meaning of that sensation.
I have to give a personal example here because I think everyone listening will relate to this. Let's talk about the sounds good Slack message.
Oh, that's a classic.
You're sitting at your desk, you send a long, detailed proposal to your boss. 20 minutes later, you get a reply that just says, sounds good, with a period. No exclamation point, no emoji.
Just the dreaded period.
Instantly, your clairsentience, your somatic intelligence goes off like a fire alarm. You feel a heavy, anxious tension drop into your stomach. Your heart rate spikes. You know the tension is real. Your body is flooded with cortisol. But your brain immediately panics and jumps to a narrative to explain the physical feeling. You spiral. Oh no, they're mad at me. I messed up the proposal. That period was aggressive. I'm going to be fired.
That is a perfect illustration of the misreading trap. You sense the raw physical sensation of tension accurately within your own body, but the cognitive story your mind rapidly supplied to make sense of the tension was a total fabrication.
Because they might just be busy.
Maybe your boss was stepping into a crowded elevator, had one free thumb, and just wanted to acknowledge receipt quickly. The misreading trap happens when we conflate the sensation with the interpretation. We rush to interpret the signal as a direct threat to us instead of just observing it as a neutral data point.
So how do we stop doing that?
To counter this, the text offers a specific three-step practice. First, you must notice the raw physical sensation in your own body, the tight stomach, the shallow breath, before your mind has a chance to name it.
Okay, notice it first.
Second, you explicitly identify the emotional label and the narrative your mind is desperately trying to attach to it. My mind is telling me I'm about to be fired. And third, you question that narrative. You step back and approach the moment as a neutral observer, separating the somatic data from the cognitive story.
That is such an intensely practical tool to stop yourself from spiraling. Because if our physical body and our potential really are the exact same living system, then awareness is the turning point. Awareness is the master key that unlocks all of these signals. But the archives point out that awareness isn't just one monolithic thing.
No, it's layered.
The deep dive breaks human perception down into 4 distinct windows of intelligence. Let's walk through how these 4 different lenses have to stack and work together, because if you are missing one, you're flying blind.
The framework of the 4 intelligences is vital for the Ayurvedic whisperer. The first window is somatic intelligence. This is the most primal layer. It arises directly through the physical sensations of the body.
What does that feel like?
It allows us to sense internal conditions like muscular tension, sudden fatigue, a feeling of physical lightness, or a drop in body temperature. It is the pure, unfiltered physical data of the present moment, devoid of any story.
Right, so that is the tight stomach in the Slack message example. Then comes the second window, emotional intelligence. This is the layer that helps us recognize and interpret our feelings: anger, joy, fear, sadness. But the critical distinction the archives make is that emotions almost always begin as bodily sensations, somatic data, long before they are consciously recognized by the mind. You feel the heat in your face before you realize you're furious.
Exactly. The body knows before the mind does, which leads to the third window, cognitive intelligence. This is the realm of the intellect. It contributes reasoning, logic, language, and interpretation.
So making sense of it all.
It allows us to step back, examine the patterns of our behavior, draw analytical connections between our physical tension and our work environment, and formulate strategic responses. Cognitive intelligence is what allows us to say, I notice my pitta is elevated when I interact with this specific client.
And the fourth window, which is often completely ignored in corporate or strictly scientific environments, is spiritual intelligence. The text describes this as relating a deep meaning, intuition, purpose and our connection to a web of existence larger than our immediate material circumstances.
That's the big picture.
But the key detail here is that the archives note the spiritual intelligence usually only becomes accessible when the vata noise of the other three forms of awareness quiet down enough for deeper structural truth to surface.
When an individual learns to synthesize these four forms of awareness, their perception of their own life becomes incredibly rich and multidimensional. Instead of simply reacting automatically to a physical symptom with a pill or reacting to a career frustration with impulsive anger, we become capable of responding with deep presence and discernment. We start to see the holistic, interconnected picture of our alignment or our misalignment.
And to really dig into that holistic picture, to actually do the work of mapping our alignment, the Talent Whisperers archives provide an upgraded, profoundly adapted version of a classic management tool, the 5 Whys.
Yes, a very famous tool.
Now, we all know the traditional 5 Whys. It started as a mechanical diagnostic tool on the Toyota factory floor. A machine breaks down and you ask why 5 times to find the root cause. A blown fuse, a lack of oil. It is an engineering tool for troubleshooting broken machinery. But Ayurvedic Whispering takes that familiar framework and completely flips it inward.
It changes the focus entirely.
This is no longer about fixing a broken supply chain or a defective part. The archives frame this as a compassionate, deeply personal excavation of inner truth.
The shift in language and intent here is paramount. When most people, especially in business, use the 5 Whys, they are deploying it to fix an error. That inherently begins with the foundational assumption that something is broken, flawed, or wrong.
That there's a problem to solve.
But Ayurvedic Whispering operates on the biological assumption that the system is never truly broken. It is simply responding to its environment. The symptom is a signal calling for understanding, not a defect requiring eradication. So instead of asking the harsh interrogative question, why did this fail, or why am I so lazy, we ask, why did this living system unfold the way it did?
It changes the tone.
It changes the inquiry from a hostile cross-examination of your own character into an act of gentle, illuminating observation.
Let's make this incredibly concrete. Let's walk you through a detailed hypothetical scenario using the specific Inner 5 Whys exercise from the text, because honestly, doing this in real life creates an enormous amount of psychological friction. Let's say you are a manager, and in a team meeting, a junior employee points out a minor flaw in your project timeline.
A very common scenario.
Instead of thanking them, you snap. You get highly defensive, you shut them down publicly, and the room goes dead silent. An hour later, you are sitting in your office feeling terrible, and your heart is still racing. You decide to run the Inner 5 Whys. You start with the first question. Why did this moment move me?
That first why peels back the immediate superficial layer of the event. It asks you to look strictly at the raw emotional and somatic reaction. You might answer, it moved me because when they pointed out the error, I felt a sudden, terrifying flash of heat in my chest. I felt instantly attacked.
You are just establishing the baseline data.
No judgment, just data. Then you force yourself to go a layer deeper to the second question. Why does that reaction feel familiar? This is where the work begins. This question connects the isolated present moment to a historical, longitudinal pattern. It demands that you recognize this isn't just about a timeline error today. It is an echo of something much older in your nervous system.
Right, so you sit with that and you realize this feels familiar because growing up, or in my very first intense corporate job, making a public mistake meant severe humiliation or punishment. The heat in my chest is the exact same heat I felt 10 years ago.
You're tracing the root.
Then you move to the third question, which looks at the cognitive architecture. Why have I carried that story? What is the narrative your mind built around that old feeling? What are you trying to protect?
The answer to the third question is almost always about survival or safety. You might realize, I have carried this story that I must be flawless to be respected because for a long time that hypervigilance kept me safe. It drove my ambition. It protected me from being vulnerable or being seen as incompetent. You are acknowledging the protective function of your own Vikriti.
But then comes the fourth question, and this is where the profound friction lies. This is the pivot point of the entire exercise. The fourth question asks for radical honesty. Why is that story still serving or limiting me? By the fourth why, the entire direction of the inquiry reverses. You stop looking at the employee who triggered you, you stop looking at the isolated incident, and you start looking through it.
This is the painful part. Because to answer question 4, you have to admit the cost of your armor. You have to say, this story of needing to be flawless is severely limiting me now. It is turning me into a tyrant. It is destroying the psychological safety of my team. It is isolating me, and it is exhausting my physical body. The armor that used to protect me is now suffocating me.
That realization is incredibly heavy. And that brings us to the final, fifth question, which is the gateway to the spiritual intelligence we talked about. Why does it matter to release or rewrite it now?
That final why brings you entirely home to your deepest sense of meaning and purpose. It completely dissolves the artificial boundary between the problem in the meeting and the overarching pattern of your life.
What would the answer be?
The answer might be, it matters to release it now because I want to be a leader who fosters trust, not fear. I want to build a legacy of mentorship, and I cannot do that while I'm a prisoner to my own defensiveness. It is no longer about fixing a behavioral error, it is about the holistic integrations of the human being. You recognize that the painful patterns and symptoms in your life aren't character flaws. They are precise, invaluable messages pointing you back toward your true prakriti, back to what matters most.
That exercise is exhausting just to talk through, but it is undeniably powerful. But it raises a huge practical question. If we're supposed to be doing this deep, compassionate excavation with ourselves and the people we lead, what is the actual stance we are supposed to take? If I have a looming quarterly deadline, how do I practically implement this? Does the Ayurvedic whisperer just sit around nodding empathetically while the project burns down?
That is the natural tension between traditional management and whispering. The posture of the Ayurvedic whisperer is defined in the archives as one of humble attention. Now, humble attention does not mean passivity. It does not mean abdicating responsibility or ignoring deadlines.
So what does it mean?
It means they do not attempt to coerce outcomes, impose rigid, prefabricated solutions, or prescribe fixed developmental paths for others. The foundational belief is that if you try to violently force someone to grow, or if you try to force your own body to heal on an arbitrary, aggressive timeline, you are directly fighting the natural evolutionary intelligence of the living system. You create more resistance.
You just make things worse.
Instead, the whisperer cultivates an intense, grounded presence. They bring curiosity and a heightened sensitivity to the subtle patterns appearing in the room. They hold the standard, but they allow the individual the space to navigate toward it.
It's a quiet, incredibly potent form of influence. The goal isn't to drag someone by the collar to a predetermined conclusion. The goal is to widen their perception, to ask the right questions that help them see new colors where they're stressed. Vata-addled brain previously saw only black and white. And the archives use a really striking, profoundly physical parallel from the somatic world to explain this psychological posture. It is a modality of physical therapy from New Zealand called contact CARE.
Yes, the inclusion of contact CRE in the archives is a brilliant analogy for how psychological shifting actually occurs. This modality works specifically with a physiological phenomenon called flinch locks. A flinch lock is a literal skeletal sensory shock. Imagine you are walking and you violently crack your shin against a metal trailer hitch. In that microsecond of surprise impact, the bone and the surrounding periosteum, the membrane covering the bone, can literally tighten defensively. It absorbs the kinetic energy and locks into a protective, hardened posture, holding that traumatic tension within the bone structure long after the physical danger has passed. It is the body's way of permanently bracing against a past trauma.
That sounds painful, so how do you fix it?
Well, a traditional mechanical practitioner might look at that misalignment and try to violently force it out. They might physically crack the joint, stretch the muscle aggressively, or apply immense external force to push the body back into a straight line. But a contact CARE practitioner does not use force. Instead, they locate the exact site of the flinch lock, and they apply precise stillness, specific rhythm, and gentle supportive contact.
They just support it.
They exactly match the pressure of the bone's defensive hold. They don't push, they don't pull, and in that incredibly safe space of profound somatic listening, by simply supporting the body exactly as it is, the nervous system finally realizes the threat is gone. The bone releases the trapped kinetic shock, it softens, and the body autonomously reclaims its natural, aligned shape.
It corrects itself. The practitioner doesn't heal the bone. The practitioner creates the exact sensory environment where the bone can heal itself. And the Ayurvedic whisperer deals with psychological flinch locks in the exact same way. Think about it. We all have internalized psychological flinch locks. We have reactions to past harm, public humiliation, or intense judgment that have locked our behaviors, our beliefs, and our interpersonal dynamics into rigid defensive postures.
Just like the bone bracing for impact.
Exactly. When a whisperer sits across from you and asks a provocative question, like we did in the 5 Whys, That question isn't meant to verbally batter you into changing your mind. The question is meant to disturb the still surface of your awareness, just enough to reveal where the psychological tension is hiding. The whisperer matches your pressure. They hold presence. They don't judge you. They wait until your old, distorted defenses lose their grip, and your own inherent truth naturally reemerges.
It requires immense restraint on the part of the whisperer. The natural human impulse, especially for leaders and fixers, is to jump in and solve the pain. But the whisperer must profoundly trust that the living system, whether it is a locked skeletal structure or a defensive human psyche, inherently wants to return to its prakriti, its natural alignment. When the external interference and the internal judgment are removed, people naturally, organically move toward healing and growth.
I buy that completely. But here's the reality check. How do we actively cultivate this alignment over a lifetime? Because we all know you can't just have one deep, tearful realization in a coaching session, release a psychological flinch lock, and then walk out perfectly fixed forever. Life is messy. We are dynamic systems. Tomorrow, the Vata chaos will return. The Pitta stress will return.
You are exactly right. Alignment is not a destination. It is a daily practice of recalibration. Cultivating alignment over time comes down to the profound interdependence of rhythm. In Ayurveda, there is a foundational concept called dinacharya, which translates to daily rhythms or daily routines.
Like a schedule.
These are not rigid, punitive schedules. They are simple, highly consistent patterns of sleep, nourishment, physical movement, and quiet reflection that actively align the biology of the body with the natural circadian cycles of the earth. Going to bed before the Pitta energy spikes at 10 p.m., waking up in the Vata stillness of the early morning.
And when you read the talent whispering side of the archives, that ancient concept of dinacharya maps perfectly, one-to-one, onto the highly modern concept of atomic rituals. These are the tiny, specific, repeatable behaviors and psychological practices that gradually, incrementally shape our identity and our professional capability over years. Because let's face it, real growth doesn't usually happen through one dramatic, cinematic intervention where the music swells.
Very rarely.
It happens through the quiet, relentless consistency of patterns, patterns of attention, practice, biological adjustment, and recovery.
When we view the concept of rhythm through the fully integrated lens of Ayurvedic whispering, we see that a daily life moving in harmony with the body's natural physiological cycles actually makes the entire psychological system exponentially more resilient and adaptable. Healing the physical body and fulfilling your highest human potential are no longer isolated, parallel efforts that compete for your time. They are deeply interdependent expressions of the exact same evolutionary process. You sleep well so that your agni is strong enough to digest the complexities of your leadership role.
But let's be entirely real for a second, because I don't want to paint a picture of Zen perfection. We do not live in a perfectly balanced, stress-free bubble. We face economic uncertainty, massive organizational disruption, personal grief, and rapid technological change. Growth almost never happens when we are perfectly comfortable. Growth usually happens when we are pushed violently near our stretch zone, or what the text beautifully calls the edge of chaos.
The edge of chaos is a concept drawn from complexity theory. It is the razor-thin threshold between rigid, stagnant order, like a severe kapha imbalance, and complete unmanageable disorder, like a severe vata imbalance.
It's the sweet spot, but it's terrifying.
Exactly. The edge of chaos is where all complex systems, including human beings, are the most alive, the most wildly adaptive, and simultaneously the most vulnerable. And it is exactly at this precipice, when we are stepping into a new role or facing a massive life change, that our internal psychological ecosystem gets the absolute loudest. When we are at the edge facing the terror of uncertainty, our internal saboteurs start screaming.
The inner critics, the imposter syndrome, the desperate urge to micromanage and control, or the urge to completely avoid and shut down, they all flare up into a massive vikriti.
And the Ayurvedic whisperer's job, whether that is a literal coach, a trusted friend, or your own internal awareness, is to help us quiet that deafening noise. And crucially, we don't quiet the saboteurs by going to war with them or suppressing them.
Because that just creates a flinch lock.
Exactly. We quiet them by listening to them with that exact posture of humble attention we just discussed. We acknowledge their fear so that our allies, our quieter inner voices of calm curiosity, deep clarity, and visionary focus, can step forward and actually guide us through the chaos.
Navigating that edge of chaos successfully, time after time, is how we develop what the archives call learned resilience. This is perhaps the most crucial takeaway for high performers. Resilience in corporate culture is often deeply misunderstood. It is usually framed as just grit.
Just push through the pain.
Right. The ability to take a beating, suppress your emotions, and painfully bounce back to exactly where you started after severe hardship. But the archives argue that learned resilience is a literal biological competency. It develops systematically through intentional cycles of right-sized challenge, profound adjustment, and dedicated deep recovery. It is about actively engaging with difficulty through progressively harder steps, and then allowing the nervous system the time it needs to fully metabolize and digest the experience.
It is exactly like building a physical muscle in the gym. You apply intense stress to the muscle fiber at the edge of chaos. You create micro tears. But the muscle does not grow while you are lifting the weight. The muscle grows while you're sleeping.
Yes, the recovery phase.
It recovers stronger with more capacity than its previous baseline. You don't just survive the challenge of the weight. You permanently upgrade the capacity of the living system so that you can handle exponentially more complex and heavy environments in the future without falling into Vikriti.
That is the perfect analogy. And when we apply the full framework of Ayurvedic whispering to this process of growth, we see the undeniable truth. A physical body that is deeply nourished, adequately rested, and rhythmically in balance creates the absolute ideal, fertile conditions for brilliant mental clarity, lateral creativity, and emotional resilience to emerge. They feed each other.
And it works in reverse, too.
Simultaneously, a psychological life aligned with deep, meaningful growth and clear purpose actively chemically influences your physiology. A sense of purpose literally downregulates stress hormones, reduces systemic inflammation, and improves your baseline emotional regulation.
Flourishing, true human flourishing, happens as a single, beautifully unified ecosystem. It is a cascading waterfall of alignment. Physical vitality creates the baseline that supports emotional steadiness. That emotional steadiness removes the anxious noise, which supports piercing mental focus. And that pristine mental clarity creates the expansive space required to discover profound meaning, intuition, and spiritual purpose. It is all one interconnected web. You pull on one thread, the whole web moves.
If we connect all of these ancient concepts and modern frameworks to the bigger picture of our lives, Ayurvedic whispering is ultimately an invitation to explore a radically new vantage point. The goal here isn't the relentless, exhausting optimization of your daily routine. It isn't some form of magical thinking where you just meditate your problems away.
The goal is participation.
Exactly.
It is learning, perhaps for the first time, to consciously, humbly participate in the immense natural intelligence of your own life. When raw curiosity leads rather than harsh judgment, transformation naturally and inevitably follows because you become a completely new, attuned observer of your own lived experience.
You become a completely new observer of your own experience. So if you take only one single thing away from this deep dive into the Talent Whisperer's archives, let it be this core truth. Your physical body's ailments, its localized tensions, its strange exhaustions, and your mind's psychological roadblocks, your sudden hesitations, your fears and frustrations, they are not enemies. They are speaking the exact same language. You are not a broken machine made of isolated, defective parts that need to be swapped out or medicated into submission. You are a brilliant, adaptive, living ecology continuously seeking its way back to balance.
This raises one final, highly personal and important question to leave you with. Now that you know the system is unified, how will you choose to respond the very next time your ecology sends you a signal of distress?
Let's make that our final, lingering, provocative thought for you to carry with you and explore on your own today. The next time you feel a sudden, crushing wave of exhaustion hit you at 2 p.m., or you experience a sharp, completely disproportionate spike of anger and frustration at a minor inconvenience at work, instead of rushing to aggressively fix it with another double espresso, or masking it with a hastily and harshly written Slack message, what would actually happen if you stopped? What if you paused, dropped beneath the cognitive story, dropped into that raw somatic intelligence, and asked yourself, what unseen, exhausted, or frightened part of my interconnected system is simply calling out for my understanding right now? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the archives. We wish you profound curiosity, gentle self-observation, and quiet, enduring alignment on your journey ahead. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.